I like to kind of coin ourselves as a beacon of wellness for longevity. I didn't want to be a successful person. I wanted to be a significant impact in people's lives, right? I wanted for people to look back and say, Kyle made a difference in my life. I'll never forget the day that I flew out there for the grand opening weekend, a blizzard came down. And it was like 18 inches of snow hit the ground. And so at the end of the day, I want people to live a longer, healthy life. So that lifespan extension isn't really as crucial as the health span extension. There's a finite amount of people that can create a movement.
Zenoti presents Growth Diaries, the fascinating stories behind the best brands in beauty, wellness, and fitness. Hosted by Sudhir Koneru.
Today in Growth Diaries, we'll recount the journey of one of the hottest businesses in the med spa space, a hot business that offers cool therapy. I'm talking about iCRYO, probably the fastest growing recovery and wellness brand. iCRYO started in Houston in 2015. By 2017, it was ready to scale through franchising. Since then, it has tripled revenue every year. By 2020, iCRYO was in the top 900 fastest growing businesses in the US. In 2023, in addition to 200 plus locations under development in the US, the brand expanded to Canada and has over 300 locations awarded and is looking further into Europe and beyond. The key to this rapid growth is one word: systems. Cryotherapy existed before, but what iCRYO did is create systems around this therapy, and it has allowed it to reach out to a mass audience and expand rapidly. And it's a story of not just fast expansion, but also deep relationships, of family values and togetherness. To tell us the story today, we have Kyle Jones. He's a professional athlete in physique bodybuilding and holds several national gold medals in competitive powerlifting. He's the co-founder of iCRYO. Till recently, he was their chief innovation and brand officer, but just a week or so back, he has taken over from his father as CEO. Welcome to Growth Diaries, Kyle. So first, Kyle, before we get started, I think it would be useful for everyone for you to educate what is the services and business that iCRYO is involved in.
Yeah, so it's interesting, this space that's kind of emerged over the last 5 years or so, they're coining it the MedTel space, so the longevity space, and it's where medical meets retail. It's a space that hasn't been here before. Traditionally you've seen kind of med spa concepts in the past, and it was very aesthetic driven, but now people are looking at the holistic approach of the entire human body. And so it's exciting to see the evolution of our mindset go from reactive-based instances in the terms of recovery and wellness, and being more proactive in that. And so the iCRYO business model is really centered around that longevity aspect. Everything from IV infusions to body sculpting and aesthetics to lifestyle services like red light therapy, cryotherapy, infrared saunas. There's just a massive wave in shifting people's knowledge and focusing on total wellness and health. And so the iCRYO business model has evolved in that way. Over the years, we've adopted the MedTel space and the longevity space, and I like to kind of coin ourselves as a beacon of wellness for longevity.
Great. See, I personally am also a very strong believer of alternative ways of healing rather than invasive ways of healing. I rarely take medication and all that. So I did get a chance to try the cryo service, at least cryotherapy. It was new to me personally, but I definitely felt it had some kind of a shift impact when I came out, and it stayed with me for a little longer afterwards. So I'm quite excited to see how I can.
It's kind of cool, right?
Yeah. But it's interesting that someone like you started this business when you were 24. And even for me at this age, I look at this business and say, it's a new service. It's a new trend. It's a new way that people are discovering around wellness, as you framed it. So at 24, for someone to believe in an early stage business and concept and say, I'm going to go start this business, sounds quite radical. So give me a little bit of context before you started the business. What was the history that got you passionate about cryo services?
Yeah, I think it stems all the way back from early childhood years. At the age of 4, my father had me in every sport known to man. I was a multi-sport athlete, and so it was always, being the best athlete on the field that I could, but also being a respective, education on the side. And so for me, that kind of created structure in my life. It created a lot of discipline. My dad, taught me at a very early age, respect, discipline, and understanding, what are the important things in life. And so for me, it molded me. I ended up obviously gaining a full ride scholarship into Division II school to play football, and so it kind of excelled my athletic career. From there, it really spun into multitude of things. I competed nationally in powerlifting for about 6 years. I competed, on the professional level from a bodybuilding perspective. So everything from diet to exercise to recovery to full-on performance. It was truly every facet of my life was wellness. And it was interesting. I pivoted right after my college years in football and became more focused on, physical therapy and really the body's regeneration capabilities. And that spawned me in to become very passionate about just how the body works in a specific way. And it was interesting, through physical therapy school, I realized that physical rehab was really focused on the mental portion of that. It's a psychological approach to rehabbing the body in a physical way. It starts with the brain. It starts with the mindset. It starts with the positivity, the energy. It was interesting. There was a study done about 10 years ago, and they proved that you could feel somebody's energy from over 20 feet away. And so in the mental aspect of recovery, directly tied to the physical aspect of recovery, because it was all about the feeling that the person had. And so for me, it was about making an impact in somebody's life from a feeling perspective and from a mental perspective to really conquer that physical issue they may be dealing with.
So it's impressive. For the first 20 years of my professional life, I didn't have much exposure to energy and the concept of other ways of your intent means a lot. Your mind is part of the game, but I learned that more recently, at least over the last 10 years. I'm such a very firm believer that our mind has more power and energy has more power. So it's impressive that you discovered that very early in life, kind of thing. So of course, that led you to, you said, going and doing a program around physiotherapy and wellness. And so what was your early exposure to cryotherapy in particular? Where did that happen?
Definitely. So I ended up getting my undergrad degree in exercise science kinesiology. That pushed me into physical therapy. I was pursuing a doctorate in PT at the time through Texas State University, and about midway through the program, I got a job at a outpatient clinic here in Houston, Texas, to kind of gain some clinical hours and get my feet wet in the space. And it was very short after having a job at that location, at that PT clinic, that I stumbled across a patient of mine that was talking about cryotherapy. This was back in 2012, so this is way before anybody really knew what it was. I think the first machines had just hit the States in 2010. And so I was one of the early adopters. I was one of the people that really understood the effects of cryotherapy on a really substantial level in the body. And long story short, we teamed up. We got a couple cryo chambers for that PT clinic for patient use. And it was interesting when we first utilized the service for just patients for recovering from a total knee or a total hip replacement or whatever it may be. The stories and feedback that I was hearing wasn't just the knee or the hip that we were treating. It was sleep, it was anxiety, it was stress, it was depression, it was just full-on mood enhancement and physical body recovery. And so, I told my boss, I said, I think there's more to this than just the physical rehab component of cryotherapy. And we dug in a lot more. We ended up getting some infrared saunas, some compression therapy, and almost creating like a recovery suite, if you will. And I just sunk into it. I felt deeply passionate about the recovery space. It's something where I dove all in to the point where I actually dropped out of PT school. I didn't finish my doctorate degree and open a clinic, which was my ultimate goal. I dove right into the longevity space. That is kind of me in a way. I'm a big risk taker, and when I'm passionate about something, I dive all in. And so it was something that I dove in, and I really didn't look back, and I kind of kept churning from there. I managed that operation for about 2.5 years, and then started iCRYO, the first location, in October of 2015, which started the journey.
The beauty, wellness, and fitness industries touch our lives like no other industry does. And every brand that has succeeded in this industry has a wonderful story behind it. We have stories that engage, stories that we can learn from, stories that inspire all of us. And I'm here to bring you these stories and introduce you to the wonderful people behind these brands. So if you're enjoying this, do press like and hit the bell icon to subscribe, so you'll be the first to know when a new episode comes in. So yeah, I've always found that, there's people who have deep exposure to certain solutions or need, and they go on to pursue founding a business with that passion. They tend to be successful, and you clearly stand out in that sense, especially to have the conviction at that young age to say, let me go start a business. Now, starting a business, and you've told me before that you didn't necessarily come from a wealthy family. You had like, okay, what check do you want me to write?
Exactly.
So tell me more about, okay, you decided you're going to start this new business. So how did you find the money and get this first store get going?
Yeah, so like you said, my family doesn't come from money, and so I didn't have a massive financial injection coming into this, and we didn't team up with, a big banking investment firm or private equity. I just kind of had a one location dream at the time, and for me, I opened up that location in my hometown of League City, Texas, is where I was born and raised, and so I wanted to serve my community. I wanted to make my community healthier because it had poured so much into me as a young kid, and kind of got the word out. I had some people in my circle that were contacting me about, hey, I hear you've got an idea. I hear you've got a business model that's pretty creative and innovative, and found an investor that believed in me, and she wrote me a $150,000 check, and I opened up the first location. Now it takes. Looking back, I probably should have asked for a little bit more. It takes a little bit more than 150 grand to open up a business these days. But at the end of the day, I found somebody that believed in me, somebody that believed in my mission, my vision, my values, my passion, and I knew immediately I needed some help. I needed some help on the financial side, which I acquired that from the investor. I needed some help on the operational and business side because I was young in my years. It was the first business I had ever started before, and so we actually launched as a marketing company. Back then, nobody knew what these services were. So we not only had to educate pricing and tours and education, but we had to get people to understand who we were, what we did, and why they should do it. And so after about a year or so, I brought my father into the business. He worked a lot on the back end financials and ensuring that the business practices were crucial and buttoned up. I was more the front end, so branding, operations, marketing, training, making sure all those things were in place. So it was always the back of the house for him, the front of the house for me, and we worked very well in that way. It took us about a year or two to really set the foundation, and then we launched our franchise model in September of 2017.
So yeah, it's always interesting for people to believe in you. I think it's not just the business idea, especially at that age. It's the person behind, and I think building that right character in early days of how you approach life and live life with a certain discipline, I think is important, because that's what exhibits people to really believe in you, kind of thing, right? So maybe that's where you could speak a little bit. I mean, you did touch on it. I mean, obviously being in sports and the discipline that it takes to play, whether it's football, whether it's other things, is a big deal. But you were taught, I think, very early. Your dad seems to have had a big influence in terms of shaping how you, use time, how you invested. You want to expand on that, because that's what got you to having somebody believe in you.
Yeah, I think it really starts with, and you mentioned it, the passion of the person is where it resonates. And, people are attracted to positivity. People are attracted to people that are passionate and have an unwillingness, desire to just succeed in life. And for me, that was always something where I didn't really ever look at success. I more looked at significance. I wanted people to understand I didn't want to be a successful person. I wanted to be a significant impact in people's lives, right? I wanted for people to look back and say, Kyle made a difference in my life. And so that stemmed from, like you said, early years of just being coached through sports and athletics, being very structured and disciplined in that way, but also respecting the fact that other people have things that they have to take care of as well. And for somebody to believe in who you are and what your vision is, it has to be authentic. I think that's one thing I've learned throughout my years as, growing this business of iCRYO is authenticity is something that people can feel that. People can sense that. We talked about energy a little bit ago, and I think that investor from day one, she saw the authenticity of my passion. And I think my dad, growing me and molding me over the years, he's always been a mentor of mine. It's somebody that I will always lean on for the rest of my life. And, at the end of the day, he saw that passion. He saw the authenticity of what I believed in, and the passion that grew that inside of me to grow what now is the, global entity of iCRYO. So It kind of starts with that and it resonates, and you start to build that team. I kind of call it a passion project, if you will, and more people start to adopt that culture. More people start to adopt those values, and it becomes more of, I always tell people, anybody can start a company. A lot of people can create a brand if you stay consistent. There's a finite amount of people that can create a movement. And so for me, that's what we've done. We've gone from a company, we've gone from a brand, which we've done an incredible job of branding iCRYO across the globe. And now there's so many people adopting the mission, vision, values of iCRYO where it's becoming a movement.
Great. And I think you use the word authenticity. I also use the word, I do use authentic, but we also use the word being genuine. Like when we hire people, I'm so passionate about finding people who are genuine and authentic, because it's very hard to, the drain on energy if you're dealing with people who are not authentic on a day-to-day basis. It's so much easier if everybody around you is genuine and authentic. It's like, hey, we can just get around to solving problems rather than dealing with other stuff, kind of thing. So
yeah, that's one of my biggest deals is problem solving. It's funny when somebody were to, or if somebody were to approach me with a problem, I would always expect at least one or two solutions. They don't have to be the right answers. It doesn't have to be the right solution, but just let me know that you're in game to problem solve.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I'm about creating solutions for problems and not creating more problems on top of problems. And so at the end of the day, I fully agree that the authenticity, but the respect of, letting people know that I understand there's a problem, but I'm willing to work as a team to create the solution, which is why one of the 8 core values of iCRYO is teamwork.
Great. So we got started with the first store. Now, you did reference the notion that you were very passionate about serving the community, but how did you find your first set of customers? It's a store which you're to fill, you're to make money, you're to make ends meet in the business. What were the different strategies you used for early marketing and bringing people in? And as you said, it's a service which people didn't even know about. It's not like, a haircut kind of thing.
Yeah, it was interesting. Back in the early years, 2012, 13, and 14, the cryotherapy sector in the Olympics became very big. And so Nike, Oregon, and the Olympics, they did a project where they were basically treating some of the Olympic athletes with cryotherapy, during their training to help them recover and a lot faster to get back onto the field or the track to perform a lot more efficient. And so it was interesting that there was a very forward-driven athletic approach to cryotherapy in these services. It didn't look like the masses were really going to adopt it, but really just your elites in the industry. And so I kind of thought that way at the very beginning. A lot of people thought that way. You had to be next to a gym or a large chain of fitness or Pilates or yoga. It was very fitness and gym heavy, and so I did that. I kind of rode that wave. We put our first location next to a big fitness gym, thinking that there was going to be a lot of the workout individuals that came and utilized our services. Looking back, I wish I would have pivoted a little bit differently, because it is general wellness. Everybody, the average person, is using our services. I would tell you maybe 10% of our clientele base is our athletes. It's the common, house mom, soccer mom, the plant worker, the physician, you name it. The day-to-day average human being is our clientele. And so when people really understand that these services aren't meant for if you're just hurt or if you're just injured or if you're just having a problem, it's meant for general wellness use to prevent things from happening, right? Being proactive about your health before something occurs. And so we started that way. When we started marketing, we really started to change our marketing efforts to, this isn't just fitness, this isn't just gym, this isn't just workout, this is for the entire masses. And so you have to put together educational campaigns around, well, why does the 31-year-old woman have to do this? Why does the 70-year-old man have to do this? Why does the 18-year-old kid that's not in sports have to do this? What are the benefits of just anybody and everybody utilizing the services that we know can help them?
Yeah. And I think even simple things like getting good sleep from a service like this has huge implications in wellness, I guess. So that's good. So when you started the business, did you always start with a membership model, or because I know today there is a membership model? I'm curious, in the early days, how did you discover this model?
Yeah, so we started out in the first version of iCRYO, when we opened up the first locations. We had set packages, we had set memberships. Our memberships, though, really were centered around 2 or 3 services. It wasn't a full array of you had a membership to kind of the whole building. So I look back and we forced people to choose 1 or 2 services, and that was your membership offering, right? You had a certain amount of credits, you had a certain amount of sessions for each service. And as we started to grow the company, I realized you need to make it more open-ended. You need to make it more available where you shouldn't force people to just do 1 or 2. Make it a little versatile, right? If you've got 6 or 7 services in the building, wrap all of those into one membership-based model where it's almost like a credits-based system. I can use 1 credit for that service this week. I can use another credit for this service the next week. And so it gives the consumer the ability to kind of be creative in what services they feel like they're getting the best results from. So we've transitioned a little bit over the years to really be, I guess, a little bit more versatile in our membership offerings, to not be kind of honing in on 1 or 2 services, but giving the guests the ability to choose from an array of services based on their choosing.
So I guess that made more sense given you've also expanded into so many more services in terms of, as you framed it, MedTel, an expansive set of, med spa kind of services which customers can choose and relate with. Now, how did you go about expanding? You started off earlier with a certain set of services, but then getting into other med spa kind of services, you needed more expertise. How did that unfold, and how did you research that space?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I look back and I see the evolution of iCRYO and where we started, how we've transitioned, and where we're at today are truly 3 different company structures. When we first started this company, it was just lifestyle services. So no medical services, no injectables. We weren't, puncturing the skin. We weren't doing anything medically driven. So we were truly just a wellness company. When we launched the franchise in 2017, we had just onboarded a body sculpting device, and so we were dabbling into kind of the med-tail, med-space, med-spa mentality. We moved 2019. I hired an ex-hospital CEO to kind of fully integrate what we know now as our medical model. But we didn't start there. We started out very easy, very simplistic. We created a very general IV and IM menu offering, no pharmacology. It was all nutraceutical based. And from there, it was really getting our feet wet into what would be like a medical directorship model. Have a physician on board, offer some basic services. We weren't practicing medicine at the time. And to be honest, the legal entities around the country didn't understand the space too well. And so they were trying to figure out what were the laws and the regulations that was going to keep this space safe. So hired him in 2019. We built a fully integrated medical team of physicians, APPs, NPs to kind of do all the things from a protocol perspective that we needed. And then we realized very quickly that this MedTel space was growing. And so we're medical meets retail. On the front end, you have a very warming, aesthetically pleasing retail environment. But on the back end, you operate as a physician practice in every way because we are practicing medicine. And so in 2021, we transcribed all of our franchise documents to become a medical franchise on paper. And we are actually practicing medicine today in our locations. So it really uncuffed us in the ability to do that. We have our full-on telemedicine company fully integrated. We've got physicians on staff that are multi-state licensed to cross over all 50 states that we go into. And now we can do things from a medical perspective that we couldn't before. So it's enabled us to add a lot of services that you kind of alluded to, but then to kind of keep going, right? Whether it's hyperbaric chambers or ozone therapy or any of the things that kind of are medically driven, we have the ability legally to do that now.
So although you started with the root of saying cryotherapy and how that was so important and it was impacting people's lives, today you're just a much broader spectrum of services. It has not to do with, but so do you ever think about the name cryo? Are you going to keep it? Or
I do. I've been asked that a lot. For me, I think we're going to go 1 or 2 directions in the future. When I created the logo, I wanted to create something that looked more like a stamp, like a brand, something that just wasn't a name, but it was almost like an iconic symbol where it's like the Nike check, right? When you see that, you don't think of a Nike check. You think apparel, you think branding, you think, elevated level of a consumer-based product. And so, either we're going to grow the brand of iCRYO and people will see that sign on the side of the road and think, just full longevity suite of services and not just cryotherapy. Or maybe they could be a potential name change in the future. We've talked about a few things.
Great.
Growth Diaries is brought to you by Zenoti, the software trusted by over 30,000 salons, spas, med spas, and fitness studios.
Obviously, you did have a whole learning process in getting the first couple of stores off the ground, making the business model work. And then you wanted to franchising with your dad, kind of. And that's when your dad got more involved, is what I understand. So do you want to expand? How did you make that transition to franchising, and how did you find your first early franchisees who were believe in you?
Yeah, so that's always a fun story. When my dad jumped on board, like I said, he's always been very good back of the house. I've always been very good front of the house. We work very well together in that way. When we launched the franchise in 2017, like I said, we were risk takers, and so one of the very first people that came into the franchise system, our very first franchisee, a guy by the name of Eric Lemon, called us from a small town of Latham, New York. It's about a city of 20-ish thousand people up by Albany and upstate, so it's not Manhattan, it's not New York City, and it snows, I think, there 7 months out of the year, and it's a very small town, and he was an acquaintance and a friend of mine from a previous company. To date, he's one of my best friends on the planet, but we knew each other from a previous company, and he called me, he sold me on, he sold me and my father on, I can make this happen, I can make this effective, and I can go win with this model. And so we sold him a location in upstate New York. I'll never forget the day that I flew out there for the grand opening weekend, a blizzard came down. And it was like 18 inches of snow hit the ground. And I'm sitting there looking outside like, this is a terrible idea. This is horrible, right? And I'll never forget the next day, grand opening day, there was a line down the street. We had about 500 people that came through in about a 6-hour period. He went into the black, I think, in week 6, and they came back, bought 4 more territories from us. And so it was our first single unit sale and our first multi-unit sale. It was him and about 2 other partners that were developing that area. So it was very clear to us at the corporate office, me and my father said, if we can make it work up there, we can make it work anywhere. And so it's been interesting to see after that first grand opening of that first franchise locations, we just hit the rocket thrusters and kept moving forward. So,
and I guess your brand and the model of services that you offer was very franchisable and still is, because how hard is it to find staff, and how easy is it for a franchisee to get going? Like, I know there's an investment involved, but in terms of the equipment and all that. But do you want to expand a little on how you have thought about making it easy for a franchisee, for somebody who wants to come in and put in money and start a store?
Definitely. So, it's interesting for people to understand kind of where my dad and I come from in the franchising space. When he decided to come on board, you had to inject a certain amount of capital to launch a franchise. Franchising is not cheap. The document creation alone is 6 figures. So when you start a franchise, it takes a good chunk of money to get it off the ground. Him and I were franchisees in a food concept at the time, so we understood what it was like to own a franchise business. We had 3 sub shops here in the Houston area, and we actually sold those off. We liquidated those assets to put money into starting the franchise for iCRYO. And so when we did that, we understood what it was like to be a franchisee. We had been in another system, and we saw some of the fail points. We saw in that system they didn't offer an architectural and engineer support. They didn't offer construction. They didn't offer site selection. They didn't offer any integrated, marketing or advertising options, right? You had to go find a third-party company. And so for me, we got together and we said, how can we make an all-in encompassing franchise model where if Joe Smith comes off the street and he has no knowledge of anything, how can we help him find a space? How can we help him, negotiate a lease? How can we help him go through permitting and all the city requirements, construction, getting the CO, and all the pre-sales, advertising and marketing? How can we build that full infrastructure? And so that's what we did. Here at iCRYO, we do site selection, lease negotiation, architectural and engineering, construction, pre-sales, everything from I think there's over 600 checkpoints in our system from franchise agreement signing day to opening day. And then from there, it's the supporting the franchisee operationally from a training perspective. And being a medical company, we have a full-on medical team that assists in those protocols.
So when I open a new store, as an example, obviously early days, You worked with community. You said you opened next to a gym because you thought maybe there'll be more people from the gym coming there. You had different strategies to get your new customers. Now with franchisees opening, how do you support them and help them saying, this is how you're going to get your first customers to get into the black quickly,
Yeah, so for us, it is more of that broad array of customer base that we have, right? Early on, we thought it was just the fitness and the workout people. Now we're realizing it's everybody. And so, the tactical approach is really honing into the buyers in your market and understanding your market. We have an in-house advertising and marketing agency that is truly a subsidiary of iCRYO. It's a separate company, but it is owned by iCRYO. And so that's our way of assisting franchisees with Google advertising, Facebook, Instagram, Meta advertising, instructing things on, pre-sales. Should you be doing pop-up events at certain businesses? What type of community engagement or networking should you be doing? And so you have your pre-sales team, you have your digital ads team, and it's really honing in with the franchisee around lead generation in itself, gaining insight from what the customer is interested in, and then educating them on what we have to offer. And so for us, the assistance from a marketing, advertising, education, and basically a workflow perspective of getting that guest in the building, but then giving them a good experience, that's where I feel like separates us from the competition. The guest experience that we provide at iCRYO, for me, is elevated to the point where I don't feel like anybody can mock or resemble that.
That's great. I've seen this. It's nice to hear that you are not only doing the digital ads and all that, because a lot of corporates will do the digital marketing and all that, but a successful early stage franchisee I've always seen has to be rooted in the community and the local markets kind of thing. And so making sure that your franchisees are getting that support to say, how do I do this locally better? Which businesses do I partner with? I think all that is very critical.
Well, and I think honestly, the most critical part, and I spoke on stage at a conference about a month ago, and I mentioned this, and it kind of, I could tell people like, oh man, I haven't thought about that. But people look at marketing and advertising as kind of like throwing up information to the world, right? Getting everybody to understand what you're doing. But what they're not realizing is with marketing, there comes compliance, right? You have state medical boards looking at you. You have board of pharmacy, board of nursing. We are a medical franchise in that way. And so we have to be very careful about the claims that we make, our advertising efforts that we put out to the public, right? And so at the end of the day, that's one thing that we're very focused on, is being compliant with our marketing, which is why we felt having an internal marketing agency could help assist in that compliance. The last thing you want is for a franchisee to go hire a third-party company that really necessarily doesn't abide by the compliance and regulations of marketing when it comes to medical services. And all it takes is one specific issue, one ding on an account, and all of a sudden we've got some of these boards coming after us for compliance. And so when I look at the educational marketing, when I look at the advertising, when I look at lead flow and generating the awareness, a lot of it stems from being compliant too, so we can exist as a business.
Cool. So you started this business because you were passionate about a service, you worked with customers, in the early days. Today, I'm assuming your focus, you've just taken on this role as the CEO of the business from your dad in just a week, and your focus is more around supporting the franchisees, I'm assuming now, because you're trying to grow so fast. So how has your role changed from the early days, how you used to, obsess over things, to today? Can you expand that? Because I think for most founders, that's important, that they're to make a switch in what they're doing when they're early as they're scaling.
Yeah, for me, the big part of the business that I wasn't fluent with early on was really the financial component of the business, right? And so for me, all the other aspects of the brand, the innovation, the image, the systems, the training, the technology, I was already kind of in tune with a lot of that. It was just really understanding, how do I take my business acumen to another level, right? How can I become the CEO of an international global wellness brand and take it across multiple continents? And so for me, I like to surround myself with people that are obviously more experienced and more in tune with a different level of executive leadership. And so I've had the privilege to surround myself with a lot of great mentors in life. Our executive team has probably got over 75 to 100 years in franchising experience. The executive leaders of iCRYO really are very versatile in healthcare and franchising, And so for me, it enabled me to lean on those executive leaders in the company, lean on some of my mentors, and really grow my business acumen. So as you kind of alluded to, I just recently became the CEO of the company a few weeks ago. The board had voted me in, and they knew the time was ready. They knew that I had kind of built up that acumen and gained that professional experience, and I was ready to take on the company and drive it to new heights.
Great. I think, yeah, that's a good insight to say many founders don't realize, but surrounding yourself with people who are probably smarter than you in certain areas really helps a lot, because you learn from them, and then, you don't need to be the best person at every piece of task.
That's right. That's right. I always tell people, for me as the CEO, I don't want to be the smartest person in the room.
Yeah.
I want my executive team to be specific in their field, experts, and then at that point in time, the team becomes an expert team. And so for me, it's always been creating a team that is substantial as far as, growth and understanding what we need to do to accomplish certain things. And I'm just the pilot driving the airplane and making sure it lands safe. But all my crew and all the experts on the plane, they're doing the work. For me, I always give credit to my team.
Great. And I think so, you have this very core belief in terms of leadership and what is a good form of leadership and what you practice. Can you expand on that, yours?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot, because when people hear about my leadership thoughts, I get that question. I'm a servant leader. For me, at the end of the day, I want to give my team as much as they need of me to go produce and to be successful, and so they can win. Ultimately, if they win, the team wins. And so I'm a big believer in leadership by permission and not necessarily leadership by position. So leadership by position is, I'm the CEO, I'm going to tell you what to do. I kind of, doing this whole metric, right? Micromanaging people and basically almost being a tyrant leader, if you will. Leadership by permission means that other people grant you the permission to lead them, right? They respect you, they respect your vision, they respect your core values. They understand that you are the person that's going to drive them to the promised land. And so at the end of the day, I've always been very big on, you have to gain the respect of your team in order to be the most sufficient leader that you can. But vice versa, you have to pour into your team in order for them to give you that respect. And so for me, I've always been a leader by permission and a servant leader in that way.
Yeah, that's interesting way of looking at it. Not many people do that, but even I too share that, where the thing which keeps me awake every day is this notion of not letting my employees down, right? Because they signed up, they're here, and I have to deliver, every day.
That's right.
And I don't feel like I'm the boss. I'm actually serving everyone
Exactly.
to make sure it's worth their time, kind of thing. And so it's so interesting. When you started this whole business, you actually said you had very simple, when we were talking, you said simple goals of saying, I want to take care of my family. And that's how, so this thing started very early about, when you were a kid, about taking care of others.
Yeah, so it's always been a dream of mine. I grew up in a family that was, mid-level income, and, we didn't go on lavish vacations. My vacation was hop in the minivan, put a big TV in there that you kind of put into the lighter and kind of road trip somewhere, right? We did a good job. My father did an amazing job of raising us. My mother is probably one of the most special people in the entire world for me. And so I got a lot of that family love, and I really understood what it was like for a family to take care of each other. And for me, I've always had a burning desire in my heart to retire my parents. I've seen my dad, work in several different jobs. He started companies, sold companies, and just the way that he's put in so much blood, sweat, and tears to making sure that the Jones family was safe, that we had a roof over our head, that we had food on the table. I wanted to repay that back tenfold. And so bringing him into the company and co-founding the franchise together, I've always envisioned, at some point there would be a transition where not only could I retain the CEO role and keep driving the mission of iCRYO forward, but he could retire, he could sit on the board, he'd take a good buyout and be able to kind of go relax and have a good, lifestyle with him and my mother. And so we've effectively been able to do a lot of that. And, I'm looking forward to the day that, as of today, actually, my dad can relax and enjoy life a little bit. So
no, but it's very interesting that I am a firm believer when you have true intent from a heartfelt intent and you put it out there and you work towards it, magic happens in the universe.
That's right.
I'm sure there were many magical moments for you, which is hard to explain as to how you went about building your business.
Yeah, I've always told people I'm pretty sure one day I'm going to have to write a book about all the details, because I could sit here talking to you for days just about all the little, I call them God moments, all the little God moments that have happened in the company where it's like, that's unexplainable and it's incredible that it's kind of teeing up in that way. And it's the story of iCRYO to date, still a lot unwritten for the future, but it is truly a story that I think a lot of people can resonate with, and I hope one day can be inspired by.
Cool. I think when you have true heartfelt intent, you'll run into a lot of God moments always. Okay, using your words. So yeah, what do you see as the future now of iCRYO? I mean, you've just taken over as the CEO. You've managed to achieve that your dads can go take a break in life, or where do you see it in the next 5-10 years?
We're growing the team. We're expanding fast. I'm putting everything into gear. We're firing on all cylinders. The team is energized, and so for me, we're doing, not a reset in a way, but almost like throwing on the rocket thrusters. We're ready to take off, and so I'm very excited. We're teaming up with some strategic alliances as far as partnerships. That could be, some financial alliances. It could be some operational and branding alliances. But we've got a lot of things happening in the background to really tee us up for some serious growth. We did go international. So last year we actually went into Canada. We brought on a master franchisee that bought the entire country of Canada. So they'll develop that over the next 7 years. We've got about a dozen or so countries that we're looking to go overseas. United Kingdom will probably be one of the first countries that we venture into. But we've got about a dozen or so countries that are in some phase of negotiations, LOI, term sheets. At the end of the day, we're here to be global. We're looking at about 1,500 locations in North America, another 2,000-ish globally from there, Europe, Asia. We definitely want to be across the globe. My vision for iCRYO is really creating a global wellness brand that people can look at and say, I trust that, I want to be there, and I want to send everybody there to be healthier, to live a more proactive and healthy lifestyle. And so for me, if we can extend the life of people that couldn't have done that prior to iCRYO engaging in their life, that's my mission, that's my goal. Affect billions of people's lives on such a significant level to where we have true life extension. And the one thing that people are looking at now in the longevity space, which is very important, they're not looking at lifespan. They're looking at the health span, right? You could live to 100, but were you healthy that entire time? And so at the end of the day, I want people to live a longer, healthy life. So that lifespan extension isn't really as crucial as the health span extension.
Growth Diaries is brought to you by Zenoti, the software trusted by over 30,000 salons, spas, med spas, and fitness studios.
It's very nice to hear how clear you are and how crisp you are in thinking about the impact you want to have in the world. And you're so early in your career still, you're just getting started, is how I would frame it. So, I'm sure I wish you the very best, and it's, we'll be rooting from the sidelines, but, you can have such a meaningful impact, and, the scale of a company which can touch people in ways in terms of longevity without intrusive, medical, surgical stuff and taking medicines. I wish you the very best. I hope this, we'll look back and say 10 years ago, I got to speak to that kid,
Yeah. At the end of the day, we've always enjoyed the partnership with Zenoti, and you guys will be our partners throughout that entire process. So we're looking forward to it as well.
Is there any particular thing you would do differently if you look back?
Honestly, I don't think there would be. The only thing that I would ever think of, and I've thought about this, is getting a really significant capital partner from day one. But I look back and I say, a lot of that money probably would have been burned, right? A lot of that would have been spent on unnecessary things. And so when I look back over the last 9 years of iCRYO, I think that where we've come from and who we are today is exactly who we should be. And so I wouldn't change anything from the past. I think the struggles and some of the scars that we've gained along the way has really made us who we are. And I think at the end of the day, you have to create those layers of toughness of growing a company. And if everything's just handed to you, you really just don't have that same desire and passion to keep growing.
Do you have a favorite movie or a book that stands out in your life?
Oh man, so it's funny. I actually had that question asked to me the other day, and there's probably a handful of books and movie series that I've kind of watched. There's one that I'll never forget in high school, and I'll never forget because I cried. And it was interesting. There was a locker room full of football players. It was my varsity team in high school. We're all watching Friday Night Lights, the football movie, and you look around and half the football team's crying, and it was hilarious. But it was interesting because the Friday Night Lights movie was about a football team. But the football team, the movie didn't inspire you based off of the sport. It inspired you about how if people came together and the significance of culture really radiating in a community could flourish 100x with that type of synchronization. And so if you're synced, if you're positive, if you're all driving the same mission and the values, it's incredible what heights you can take, but how deep it can affect a person. And so for me, it was Friday Night Lights.
Great, great. Now I have to go watch it. I haven't seen it, so cool. Is there a company that you admire most?
Ooh, yeah. So I'm very fascinated by Tesla. For me, I think Elon Musk is probably the biggest innovator the world has ever seen to date. I am fascinated by how he's thinking not just 5 to 10 years ahead, he's probably thinking 50 to 100 years ahead of everybody else. And so his passion and desire for really creating change in what the human being is and what we can do here on Earth, which we know he's trying to go to other planets, but his drive and his ability to see so far down the road is something that I've always admired. For me, I'm an innovator myself. And so I've always admired other CEOs or founders that have created companies that are just not massive in size, but massive in vision. So I love Elon Musk and how he's wired.
In very brief terms, why do you think a customer should choose iCRYO?
For me, it's the guest experience. You have a lot of companies that have the similar service or maybe the exact same service. You have a lot of companies that have a similar square footage or branding tactic that we might have. At the end of the day, I think that what separates us is our guest experience. We focus very, very heavily inside the center to make sure all staff understands this isn't a business. This is another version of that person's house. We want them to feel that comfortable. We want them to feel like they're at home. We want them to feel like they're being taken care of, like they're being pampered. And they're not just somebody that's swiping a credit card, but it's somebody that's investing in their life. And so for us, I think the guest experience is what separates us from everybody else.
So tell me, what is one attribute of yours which has really helped you in life in terms of how you live life?
I think being intentional with my time. For me, time is the one thing we don't get back. It is probably the most valuable thing that I respect in life in general and that I respect in other people's lives. And so when I learned to live an intentional life and not an accidental life, it changes your way of thinking. Most people just accidentally go through the day, right? Go through the week and go through the month. They just kind of stumble along life. For me, when you find out that time is the most precious thing we have and somebody giving you their time is probably the most important thing they could ever do for you, and you understand what that means, for me, it's being intentional about your time. So it's everything from the friends you hang around, the family members you hang around, the people in business that you give your time to, right? Whether it's your staff, whether it's your investors, or whether it's your franchisees, or whoever it may be, the individuals and the human beings that not only you spend time around, but that you dedicate purposeful time to, that's essentially going to tee you up for living an intentional life of significance. And so for me, it's time.
Great. It's great to hear that because, I do also, of course, value time a lot. And I try to tell my kids, so listening to you was very more motivational for me. So I'm going to make them watch your
I love it.
So maybe they'll listen to you more than me.
No need to start valuing your time.
Yeah. And I also am a big believer that, time is the one construct which I have a problem with in our lives, in the sense that, something about time I don't buy. It's like this whole infinite time concept. It's like, I feel there's something we haven't figured out about time. Yeah. Someday we'll figure it out, Thanks a lot, Kyle. It was really motivational for me personally to see someone as young as you being so sharp and crisp in their thought process and taking the time out when you value time to share with everyone. And again, I would tell you that if you even just touch one or two people in terms of how they get motivated and what they do, it's worth your time. So I appreciate your time and helping us out here.
I hope so. Me too. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Growth Diaries is brought to you by Zenoti.